Hi, and welcome to another episode of You Haven't Seen What? A married couple's quest to rectify the wrongs of their partner never seeing culturally relevant movies. I'm Joelle.
And I'm Parry.
And we're married.
Yes,
we've seen this movie.
Well, yes, we saw it before we were married, though, so doesn't that count as seeing it for the first time?
Well, I think this is the first time I actually remember seeing the entire movie on a big screen.
Okay, that counts.
I think that kind of sort of counts.
Yep. To be fair, this is one of those that I don't think anyone who was under 10 in 1986, well, you were.
I was 9.
Yeah, I don't think that there are many people under a certain age who haven't seen this movie. And in fact, I think a lot of people who are even younger have seen this.
Yeah, it's one of those feel-good Americana movies that still have an air of something for the women. So, there's that.
Well, yes. I mean, you've got a great volleyball game for both the men and the women. Correct.
You do.
So in case you haven't guessed what we're talking about.
Oh, we're talking about Top Gun?
Yes.
I'm going to send you up against the best. Yes, sir. You two characters are going to Top Gun.
I feel the need for speed.
For 5 weeks, you're going to fly against the best fighter pilots in the world.
It takes a lot more than just fancy flying.
There are no points for second place.
You figured it out yet?
What's that?
Who's the best pilot?
Tom Cruise, Kelly McGillis. Top Gun.
Did I not say that already?
No.
Oh.
I think everyone could get it just from that description, though.
Oh, something for everyone? Pro-Americana?
There we go, yep.
There's a lot of pro-Americana. There are a lot of pro-Americana movies happening all the times. But yeah, we're actually talking about Top Gun. And to have a good disclaimer at the very beginning, we've both seen this movie. I haven't seen it as much as Parry. I think Parry saw it a lot more and definitely in the theater more. I only saw it once in the theater. How many times did you see it in the theater, Parry?
Oh, geez. Probably 5.
5 times?
Well, and it was close to me at that time. I had just turned 13 and, the testosterone was flowing. The Cold War had existed for my entire lifetime. So, little did we know how late it was in the Cold War, but I was into G.I. Joe toys, so the foundation had already been laid for my extreme excitement at watching all of this military hardware at work, blowing up evil villains. And, I could pretend it was my G.I. Joe Sky Striker toy and blow up some bad guys. So, yeah, this movie really hit me in the right place at 13.
Well, and to be fair, it hit the right place for a lot of people at that time. My dad actually saw it in the theater, which he's not a really big moviegoer. So the fact that he and his friends got together and I think came by default because I was only 9. You couldn't really leave me home alone. And I don't know where my mom was, but for some reason I ended up going and seeing Top Gun at age 9. Probably not the most appropriate thing, but whatever. And I ended up loving it, and he ended up loving it. He had a hat that said Top Gun. I think I jacked that hat at one point. I don't know where that hat is now.
And you had something that rhymes with hat that you named Maverick.
Oh, yeah. We had a cat, and I didn't name him Maverick. My dad named him Maverick, and I got that cat when I was 12. So to give you an idea of how embedded that movie was in his head. So yeah, 3 years later.
Right.
We're naming our cat Maverick.
Now, did you all own a VHS cassette copy of Top Gun?
I mean, I don't know. My dad really wasn't big into owning those things. It was more me that was big into owning those things. And I'm sure I did at one point. I definitely know that I have a DVD copy of Top Gun. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen it on cable. I will always watch it. So when it came back out in the theaters as like a special re-release, I wasn't sure I wanted to see it, and we weren't sure that we wanted to see it. Just because
it might not resonate as well with me at this point, but
right. No, but it did, and it was amazing. And I was like, yes, I cannot wait. What happened? I saw the trailers for the Comic-Con trailers for the new movie, for the sequel.
Right,
And then
Maverick.
I was like, yeah, let's go watch Top Gun in the theater, like regular. Yeah. Like all gung ho about it. Because it does make me feel a way. I mean, this is a movie that you either love or you hate. It's very polarizing that way.
I think even if you hate it, you kind of secretly love it too. I don't know how many people
Really? Why?
hate everything about it. There are some elements of it that we'll get into that I think are problematic, but I think even then we find ways to justify liking other parts of it to ourselves. I think there's always something in a film like this that you find to like, because it is sort of Hollywood at its greatest 80s-ness.
Right. Yay, Simpson and Bruckheimer.
Indeed.
Pretty much. So what do you have as a synopsis for Top Gun?
I have sweaty men compete against each other for a volleyball championship and some stuff with cool planes. Now,
Really? Why do you have to go jokey with it?
Well, because I figured, one, you'd have a really good one, because you always do. And two, I wanted to early on, these jokes have been made about Top Gun for a long time, about the sort of homoerotic elements within it. And I am not going to spend the entire show talking about those or making that my focus. So I wanted to get that out of the way pretty quickly. Even though Air Boss Johnson really wants some butts in this movie. I mean, who is he? Tina Belcher?
I need fresh faces and fresh butts. That goes in the butt bank. I'm nuts for butts.
But there's a lot of very interesting references in this.
This gives me a hard on. Don't tease me.
I'm going to try and stay away from those. I might touch here and there, but I just figured we need to get that out of the way.
All right, now
at the start.
Yeah, here's the real synopsis. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell has a chip on his shoulder, and that chip might make him the most brilliant or the most reckless fighter pilot in Miramar. Dun dun dun.
Well, see,
I'm just saying.
I said yours would be good, so I figured I'd go the fun route.
Oh, geez. Really? Why are you always making me be the heavy? Always the heavy.
You know what? You're so much better at bad cop than I am.
I hate it. It's so annoying. So annoying. With that, I'm going to roll into favorite quote since you're actually letting me speak.
Uh-oh.
So your favorite quote?
Gosh, it is a target-rich environment when it comes to quotes. And that is a great one. This is what I call a target-rich environment. Once again, a quote that could be taken for men or women. Son, your ego is writing checks your body can't cash is awesome. But I think the one that sums up the whole movie for me is you don't have time to think up there. If you think, you're dead. And that's because this whole movie is about instinct over thought. And I mean, how many young men in particular unfortunately made this their guiding philosophy in life, maybe like right next to their mental bumper sticker of do or do not, there is no try. But it's a very testosterone-fueled worldview, and I'm not saying that the everyone gets a trophy route is always the best way to go either, but in the military, good instincts are what'll keep you alive in a combat situation, and those instincts can be taught or at least honed with training. So I think that line really sums up the whole movie, and you don't want to think too much about this movie. You just want to go with it and enjoy.
Okay. Really? That's your best line? I don't think you're dead, I guess.
I think as it summed up my overall thoughts. I keep wanting to overthink things about this movie, and I'm going to talk about those in here. But
don't overthink these things in this movie. No. This is just supposed to be like great popcorn movie. This isn't supposed to be something major and huge and mind-blowing in your brain. This is just supposed to be fighter pilots and go America and shit. Like, it's not supposed to be anything crazy.
Well, I think that was the problem, is that the very go America fuck yeah! Attitude of it is super duper 80s, and it's very much at that time when the military and patriotism and the flag were all kind of deeply wrapped up in one, and not that they aren't still. Fuck yeah! But as we got into the 90s, I think those same kids who had grown up with parents who were workaholics and no points for second best philosophy of the 80s kind of rejected that way of living, and I don't know, maybe that was the origins of grunge. But things really changed in terms of the depiction of the military in the 90s. It was a much more, frequently more suspicious light, sort of like X-Files type stuff.
Well, there's a lot of, movies and media changes as we change and as we evolve as a society. So, once you start having exposés and the Iran-Contra affair, and you have things that are happening and coming into light about what our military does or doesn't do, or what our government does or doesn't do, then I think that, media kind of reflects that in a way as much as it possibly can, right? Because it's tied up into the big six. But it's, I think Top Gun is what it set out to do, which was to go ahead and tell a story about these fighter pilots who are training at the school in Miramar, which was a real thing. It's based on a real article written about these fighter pilots and this training school. And, I don't hate it. I'm not going to hate on it. Some of the military culture, it has a lot, to be desired, objectifying of women and all these other pieces. But there's a lot.
Oh, you mean leaves a lot to be desired?
Yeah, leaves a lot to be desired. Sorry. There's a lot too in there that I do love about it. I don't mind the competition. I do really want everyone to be the best of the best. Sometimes circumstances happen and you can't necessarily be number one. And how do you go ahead and grapple with that sense of loss for not being number one, and sense of loss, because Goose dies. Sorry, spoiler alert, if no one's seen Top Gun.
Well, and therefore he doesn't win Top Gun. And,
right, but more importantly, he doesn't win like life, because he just lost the person he's the most closest to in his entire life.
Right.
So there's so many layers in that too.
Yeah. And they definitely take the military conversation out of it early on with the scene where Viper says, "We don't make policy. We are the instruments of that policy." And therefore they remove the need for that conversation out of the film and move right into the action.
Yeah, and that's really any law enforcement.
Yeah,
any
that's
branch
true.
of law enforcement, period. Your legislatures and your legislative bodies and your executive offices make those policies. And really, law enforcement is there to carry that out. Same thing with the judiciary. Like, they're there to go ahead and carry out and recommend and sentence accordingly. They're not there to make new policy. If something comes up the chain and it's not constitutional, that's where judiciary steps in. But law enforcement as a whole, that's not their role. Their role is to go ahead and enforce the laws. That's it. That's all you got. So when the military does something, it's because somebody else told them to do that something, and that something is generally from precedent or from law or from something that someone has passed. So,
and then you can get into the whole following. I was just following orders argument, but we won't go there for this discussion.
We won't. I have my quote.
Yes.
So my quote is when Kelly McGillis, or Charlie, says, "I'll have what he's having. Hemlock, is it?" Because that goes to his self-sabotaging nature, which I think a lot of us sometimes have in regards to success and meeting that success, and sometimes sabotaging ourselves along the way. So I definitely think Pete Mitchell, aka Maverick, has that trait of self-sabotage because of his history, or his father's history with the military.
Right.
And what he thinks his name is or isn't within the military. And how do you really take that chip off of your shoulder? And how do you get rid of the self-sabotage to actually being the best of the best?
I had no idea what hemlock was when I first saw this. So it took me a while to get that line.
I didn't either. So that's why I feel like we had to sort of talk about this movie, because how many people haven't seen this movie recently in its entirety and actually paid attention to the movie?
Once again, as we've talked about before, seeing it in a theater environment really focuses you on some of the smaller details that you don't always pay attention to when you're walking in and out of the room doing laundry while you're watching it. So you're right, you get a lot more out of it when you actually watch the whole deal, including the little pieces.
Yeah. Was there anything that struck out to you, like a scene that like really struck you as, wow, I don't remember it being like that? Was there anything like that for you at all?
I think I I had not really, I don't know if it was so much a scene, but you were just mentioning it. I had forgotten about his father. And I feel like the discussion of not only his father that he didn't really know, but the fact that his father supposedly made a mistake. And when he finally gets the revelation from Viper that his father didn't screw up, he just happened to be over a political line and, fighting in a place they weren't supposed to, and that's why he always had a bad name. And that was a really interesting turning point, and I think it really connects to what Top Gun means culturally, is that it really completed that shift from looking at the U.S. military as having failed in Vietnam and not being a formidable fighting force to having recovered from that and being something different, having rebuilt itself. And I feel like Top Gun, for better or worse, kind of was the completion of that cycle and really kicked the U.S. military, into a whole different realm in terms of how people perceived it. So, but I think that connection with his father in Vietnam was really important to the script, and I had really forgotten about it. Although that scene with him and Viper is extremely important because it's very much that mentorship moment. He's the in the hero's journey. He's his mentor who helps him.
Yeah, I think I forgot about, that opening scene with Cougar. I really forgot about, how shaken up Cougar really was about the entire thing. And John Stockwell really does an amazing job playing Cougar. Just the emotional impact and how shaken up he is after, the near miss, and how he just can't get back on it. Like he just is paralyzed, really, and can't get back into fighting, or can't make it back to the ship. He's just stuck because he came too close.
And it's kind of a small role for him, but he does have a great leading role in a movie called My Science Project that I bet you've never seen.
I bet I've never seen. I bet half the people listening have never seen.
Right. It's a great movie, though. It's silly but fun. But yeah, he really, really does bring it across well in the beginning. I agree.
Yeah, and then I definitely cried when Goose died again. I mean, I think I cried the first time, maybe. I'm not quite sure, just because somebody is dead. But, like, that scene was just different now. It's, I don't know if it's that, I don't know. God. Which brings me sort of to my good. I mean, are you ready, or do you want to talk about Goose dying?
Well, I was just going to say, I think we're at an age where, and not that a lot of young people haven't known people in their lives to pass away, but I think we're at a point in our lives where we've known people who are close to us who have died, and so it sort of strikes you in a different way because it connects to you reliving those emotions of people sometimes having died too young or violently, and I think that's why it, to me, had a little more profound impact because, for one, Anthony Edwards is such a good actor, and he plays Goose so perfectly as
well.
That great, goofy, fun guy that everyone would like to know. And, of course, then they've got a whole bromance going. And he really was Maverick, Pete Mitchell's grounding element. And when that's gone, he spirals off. And so I think the impact of that is huge because it's played so well and written so well for Anthony Edwards.
Exactly. Which sort of really brings me to my good.
Yes.
My good, honestly, I was going to say ensemble, and then I really have to tell you, it's got to be Tom Cruise in this film. I don't think maybe not until Rain Man, I don't know. Like, this was Tom Cruise at his best. I mean, it really was. And then, of course, I know he goes on to Mission Impossibles, and really he's just, I feel like recreating the same role. Pete Mitchell, Lieutenant Pete Mitchell, over and over and over again for every single one of those. But this really was the best role for him. He was convincing. He was compelling. I actually felt like he was acting. So, like, there's the arrogance, there's vulnerability, there was a little bit of lust. Like, it was all of everything. And I was like, yes, finally. That's right. Tom Cruise could act. And And I forgot that. I forgot that somewhere along the way. I just tossed it up to like, oh, really, could he? Or was it just like, oh, hormones of a prepubescent girl sort of happening? Like, I didn't really remember. But yeah, rewatching it, I was like, no, he really could act. He really could do something before he jumped up on a couch and Oprah's couch and decided to go crazy pants. So yeah.
Well, that was before he got too deep into Scientology.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation.
It's also a role where, you can kind of place that moment in time for actors where, unfortunately, it is their height, but you also know it could be the beginning of the end, because it's when he started playing not just the same type of character, but the same type of larger-than-life character. And he even says that it was his first larger-than-life role. But once you start playing that and playing it so well that that's what everyone wants to cast you for, then after a period of time, you start to become almost a self-parody. And he has tried to do different things to break out of that a little bit, but it always comes back to Pete Mitchell. He's always playing Maverick, you're right. And there are moments like in The Mummy where it took me half the movie to realize he was trying to be funny, I think. I'm still not entirely sure, where he seems to be almost parodying that image we have of him, in the, that's my face. I think he was trying to do something different. I just couldn't get it because I'm so used to seeing him play Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible and so many other roles that are basically coming back to Maverick. A very on-the-nose name.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So what's your good?
My good, especially having seen it on the big screen, is the aerial photography. It is still beautiful. Those scenes with the planes, even though there are all kinds of continuity errors and issues with how a real dogfight would look and work, the shots of the planes flying around, once again, as I said earlier, the military hardware, those F-14s look gorgeous, and the shots they do with them are beautiful. They even the camera work, or the cameras that were designed, they went to Grumman, who built the F-14s, to design new cameras that could film forward and backward and get shots unlike had ever been done before. And again, on the big screen, they still looked beautiful.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
And they still get your heart, your adrenaline pumping. And some of that is the pushed up sound. Like, they really crank up the sound in those scenes, but it's necessary because an F-14 Tomcat or similar fighter jet is freaking loud. So it was really necessary to have it be, chest thumping that way, and it really works.
So I know this is a production note and I'm stepping all over you.
Uh-oh.
I know. The aerial footage was shot by Art Scholl.
Yeah, a lot of it was.
Yeah, and he, while shooting, actually ended up in a flat spin and couldn't recover and died while shooting the film. So, and his body was never recovered, nor was the plane.
Yeah, so they're not entirely sure what the failure was. And I think it was an intentional flat spin to get some footage of the spin, but he wasn't able to recover it.
Right. So... let's see.
Truly unfortunate.
Yeah.
The film is dedicated to him as well.
Right. My bad is that, why did we not have a sequel? That's some dumb shit till now. Like, we would have all gone to see the sequel.
Well, I know that there was some pushback against a sequel. I think Tom Cruise pushed back, and finally there was a script where he was going to be an instructor, and there was going to be a scrappy young woman who was just like him when he was younger, and that was going to be the big twist of it. And I think he and some others felt like it was just a rehash of what they had. So I guess that's why it's taken so long to get to the sequel point.
I guess. That's dumb. Listen, a lot of money on the table for a long time.
Yeah. And, who knows? We'll see what the sequel brings. There's rumor of drones, of stuff about test pilots, of Goose's son. There's all kinds of interesting conversation around it, and we know John Hamm is going to be in it, and Jennifer Connelly. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? What was your...
I know we got F-18 Hornets in it, because that's all you see throughout the whole ad. And
oh my God, your little inner boy is just giggling with excitement right now. I can tell.
Well, I think the interesting part now is I don't know if they're going to go more into him being a Maverick, because modern aircraft, fighter aircraft, after the F-14, most did not have a two-seater version. They were all one-seater aircraft, and the F-18 two-seater, to my knowledge, is only a trainer and not a fighter plane. So I'm not sure if they're going to do that same type of relationship, or that's going to be part of the conversation, is how now everybody is sort of alone in their plane. But the F-14 really was the last of the two-seater in combat mode planes.
Okay. You're bad.
Well, my bad was, okay, Goose dies. And we got, poor Pete in the bathroom looking depressed in his tighty whiteys, which is really distracting, first of all, because, even if you're not trying to stare at Tom Cruise's ass, there it is right there in front of you in the tighty whiteys while we're supposed to be feeling depressed.
I think that's only because we saw it on a big screen.
And they're wet and sweaty. And
whoa.
And then
do you have something to tell me? Do you have something to tell me? Is there a reason why we shouldn't be married any longer?
I know they talk about hard-ons a lot in this movie.
Do you have something to tell me?
Only that the underwear was very distracting. But then, but then in walks Tom Skerritt.
I think that's such a bad. Go ahead.
In full Viper. And basically says, Goose is dead. And he says, I know. And within a couple more breaths, he says, you got to let him go. Maybe you want to wait a few days? I know we need to get back in the saddle and get back up there. And, in the military, you're going to lose close friends and you've got to keep going right away. You often don't have time to stop and think about it. But, maybe you just want to give him a little time before you tell him you got to move on. So, and that's with the tighty whities on. So something about all of those pieces happening seemed like the wrong combination of elements to me. That scene just stood out as not working well for me.
No, they maybe should have cut to him going into his office and then sort of saying, like, you could have had that shot of him just having like a solace and then literally walking to, Viper's office and then them having that conversation. If you wanted to have the gratuitous butt shot.
Maybe it was just bad flashbacks because, I wore tighty whities as a kid and I look back on them now and go, how did I even tolerate that? And I even went to college still wearing them and soon after ditched them. But wow, yeah, a real flashback of constrained body parts.
That's the only thing you're still wearing from college. I'm just saying.
Okay, yes, you have dramatically updated my wardrobe for the better.
Oh, boy.
I give you full credit.
Yeah, like welcome to the grown-up world. There are choices.
I think there are many men who get to an advanced age needing that help and don't always get it.
Yes. Let's see. And finally, my ugly. I think you're gonna go harsh, so I'm not gonna do that. My ugly is that Kelly McGillis is not in the sequel, and I know that has nothing to do with this movie.
Yeah.
But that makes me agitated because I'm sorry, Kelly McGillis was amazing, and Tom Cruise wouldn't have had the person to play off of, had they just not had Kelly McGillis. So, quite honestly, I think that pisses me off. So that's what I got for my ugly. That's some bullshit.
I would agree. I was really shocked when I realized that she was not going to be in it, and I don't think they even called her to be in it. From what she's saying,
didn't call her. Nothing. Nada. Zip. Zero.
Which is doing her pretty
bullshit.
dirty. Yeah, because if you look at who she's really based on, she's based on Christine Fox, who is a real person, and she actually, originally in the script, they were going to have a sort of a groupie, sort of a traditional Hollywood bimbo. And during a conversation with an actual officer, I believe, Bruckheimer and Simpson, it was Admiral Tom Cassidy. He called Fox into the room and brought her into the conversation, and they went, oh, wow, okay, we didn't know there were people like this. And she was a civilian, as she is played by Kelly McGillis. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And had a master's in advanced mathematics, and she moved up the ranks really quickly and became the acting deputy secretary of defense at the Pentagon. And so she's been considered one of the Pentagon's most brilliant strategic thinkers and broke tons of barriers in getting there, and truly amazing person who didn't really like how she was being portrayed in the film. And Kelly McGillis agreed with her. Like, she's like, you wouldn't have to wear these stockings, these black seamed stockings to work, would you? And, they commiserated about some of that was pretty typical 80s Hollywood machismo, especially with Simpson and Bruckheimer. But it would have been cool to bring McGillis back as, even just for a little bit, as this high-ranking Pentagon official.
This nod.
Yeah, she could have been on a fucking FaceTime or something. They could have done something to show that she had kept advancing after the events of the Top Gun movie and not just become Tom Cruise's woman, and that was all that ever happened to her, and she just, and they broke up at some point, and that's it.
I mean, this is my ugly. Is this your ugly now too, or are you just hijacking my ugly?
Sorry?
You have your own ugly? Okay.
No, please go ahead.
I was done.
Oh, okay. No, I just really agreed with you because I thought I didn't know much about the real story of that. I'd heard it was a real person, but I did not realize quite how impressive an individual that she was. So,
call sign legs, because she was 6 foot.
Yes, and she said they could always hear her coming because she was the only one who wore shoes that clicked.
Heels, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, and the reason I want to be very specific about she was a really amazing person because she often got you're the smartest woman I've ever met. And there was a commanding officer that once said, I like women for a lot of things, and being smart isn't usually one of them. So she dealt with a lot of macho creeps over the years.
I understand that.
Yeah. You deal with that a lot, I know.
A lot.
Yeah, it exists.
Nothing like being a biracial, nothing like being multiracial woman in the field that I'm in.
Mm-hmm. And
academia, law enforcement, you name it.
I'm going to say, and a smart one. And so people don't always respond well to that either.
Nope, they don't. But that's okay. What's your ugly?
Well, first of all, I want to say, to give a little context, that I don't have a problem. I am not criticizing the existence of a military or those who serve in the military. I just sometimes have problems with the propagandistic nature of the military's relationship with Hollywood sometimes. And
wait. Can't you just back up a little bit, though?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's Hollywood that went to the military and said, hey, we'd like to do this. It wasn't the military that went to Hollywood and said, could you do this?
Very true.
Okay.
But they actually had them rewrite parts of the script to be more flattering or at least less negative in terms of, like, Goose was originally going to die in a midair collision, and they said no. Especially because Cougar was originally going to die in a crash at the beginning, and that's how Maverick and Goose get the slot. And so they wanted it to not seem so dangerous.
But isn't it also more realistic? So, like, Cougar bowing out, I think, is actually a realistic thing that might have happened.
Yeah, I can go with that. But Goose getting caught up in the canopy is highly... That really wouldn't happen that way. It's not the way the canopy separates from a plane. So that's one
fair.
That we always just kind of give that an, okay, it's Hollywood. That's fine. But I think it was more so that, yes, it was sort of a shameless glorification of the military-industrial complex, and the military gave them some big discounts. So basically the taxpayers paid for the making of Top Gun in a lot of ways. So it was only $1.8 million when it should have cost a lot more for those flying hours and the use of the aircraft carriers and all those things. And so the fact that taxpayers subsidized this movie that was then used as a recruiting tool,
well,
I found a little bit problematic. And the fact that
isn't that just putting your I don't know. I see a double-edged sword.
I mean,
understand what you're saying.
It was smart marketing on their part.
Right. It's so if I would have spent the marketing on this or the marketing on giving somebody a discount or giving the cost amount that it would have cost me for that fuel or for that engine or for that time, I think that that's probably a smarter move than going ahead and paying somebody to print pamphlets and then handing them out, because the recruitment went up. What was it, like 500%?
Yep, especially those wanting to be naval aviators. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it didn't work.
Oh, no, it worked.
Okay.
And they went the extra step of putting recruiting stations in the movie theaters.
Well, that's actually smart.
It is smart. And I have to say that the film worked on me. I heavily considered going into the military. I was 13, like I said, when I saw this. So when I would have been of age, even at that point, I was still thinking about it. And I would say that Top Gun was one of the major influences on me for wanting to do that. So it really did work that way. And I think that, yes, in showing Goose's death, there is shown some cost of being a part of the military. I think that sometimes you just need a better balance. Like in the end, no U.S. pilots were shot up, but no one got killed. And I think that sort of downplayed. Yes, I know it's a summer fun blockbuster, and I get why we didn't have.
It also was like one small little mini dogfight. It wasn't as if you sent up hundreds of planes and nobody died.
Yeah.
Right. You literally sent up 3 planes. So that's not too far fetched. I would think it'd be different if you sent up 20 planes and no one died, or something else like that. But in terms of, ratio and what sort of happens to the amount of people, I don't feel too bad about that ratio, quite frankly. They talk about there are 3 different deaths or instances where somebody is injured, right? Mm-hmm. So the first one with Cougar, he taps out pretty much like, I can't handle this anymore. I don't have that edge anymore. Yeah. I'm afraid to die, right? So they have that one. Then you have Goose, and Goose dies, right? Then you also have Maverick's dad, right? Who died while in battle, right? So you technically have 3 deaths for what? Are we talking about like 20 pilots maybe? So that's not that unreasonable, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And again,
it did glorify it all the way.
And then the subsequent commercials that came out afterwards
had
Danger Zone like music to them, and they were cut in a more, because this is a very MTV military movie. It really shifted the game that way. I mean, the way they have this dizzying combination of fast cuts and slow motion, and that opening sequence alone, the first 4 minutes are so freaking brilliant in terms of how they're shot that I think anyone, even if you're in Greenpeace, you might consider joining the military watching that scene.
Yeah.
Because it's extraordinary. And I think that's just where, as I always talk about media literacy and critical thinking, in deciding if that really is for you, because any movie that depicts something is probably not depicting it fully in an accurate manner. And so I think that's more the issue, is who might have been pulled into an image of what being a naval aviator was versus really being one.
But aren't we all given these images? That is the issue with a lot of things that are in the media in general. We're all given these ideas of, what's, a behavioral analyst at the FBI? What do they look like?
Yes, they don't all get to be, in fact, who really is Clarice Starling, right?
What became of your lamb, Clarice?
Who's Clarice Starling, who is Penelope from Criminal Minds.
Right.
Who are really the folks from Mindhunter, right? So,
yeah.
It's tough. You want to go ahead and have them in the best light. And also, you do have flaws, or they have flaws, or things happen to them as well. And it's just about the balance of it. How do you balance it all? So.
And I think that really...
I'm not mad.
And neither am I. And that's the thing, is that I walked out of seeing Top Gun on the big screen just as pumped up as I was when I was 13. And though I was thinking about different elements and examining it in different ways, it still made me feel excited. And I think that's the true power of something like that. And also, the fact that a movie like that is so pop culture defining that not only does it draw attention to some particular aspect of culture, but the culture itself starts to change to be more like that. You know, like Ray-Bans, the glasses, though they were worn by Navy pilots and different people at the time, they became much more popular and became much more part of that image of being a naval aviator.
Glasses and bomber jackets and leather and the whole white shirt with jeans and that whole look. Yeah.
And that, you know, the culture started, much like we see in many things. There's a really good article by Ben Adams on Overthinking It. It's called Top Gun Culture from September of 2013. And he writes some really interesting stuff about things like, you know, Wall Street, the movie was an indictment of that type of behavior, but people didn't always see that. They took the parts they wanted and began to behave more like Gordon Gekko than less like him. And, you know, a movie like Top Gun, like I said, influenced with the glasses or influenced the way that real Navy aviators behaved and spoke and interacted with themselves and with the public. And so it was one of those culture-shifting films that actually began to change the real things in the world they were about. In fact, it's funny that at the real Top Gun school, you get fined $5 for quoting the movie Top Gun because they're so sick of it.
That's awesome. And with that, because you're just overlaying the shit out of production notes with your good, bad, and ugly, just overlaying the crap out of it. Let's go to production notes. So it was directed by the late Tony Scott, produced by Simpson and Bruckheimer, written by Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr., based on an article called Top Guns by, I'm not going to pronounce
the name is tough. It's a tough name. I looked at that one too and I was like, nope, I'm not saying it.
Ehud, Yoni. Oh God, Yone. Oh, so bad. Cinematography.
We apologize.
I'm so
EHUD is the first name.
He's actually passed, but
I'm not making fun of the name. I just don't want to pronounce it badly.
No. I'm gonna have we should have the link up to the actual article anyway. Edited by Chris Lebzanon and Billy Weber. Production company was Simpson and Bruckheimer. Distributed by Paramount. The release date for New York was May 12th, 86th, and then the United States was May 16th. Running time was 110 minutes. It did not feel like 110 minutes.
No, it's very quick, fast-paced.
Budget was $15 million. Box office was about $57 million. IMDb rates at about 6.9, which I thought was odd.
It's very interesting. I saw that too.
Yeah. Critics rated a 55% on Rotten Tomatoes. I also thought that was odd. And audience was an 83% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I sort of expected the IMDb to be like an 8 point something. I didn't expect it to be less than 7. So.
And I was reading somewhere that a lot of the critics who, even though professionally they pan it, sort of secretly love it. It's just one of those movies, like I said, that it is hard to hate all the way around. Even for its imperfections, those have become sort of just part of the whole experience of it.
Yeah, I find it to be so odd that people. And can't you just actually love it? I don't understand. You can be like, listen, accuracy, 5. Military industrial military complex. Okay, it's like, a 10 on that freaking scale. Like, we're glorifying the shit out of it. My opinion is that it's a good popcorn movie. Hey, and my critic professional opinion on it is like, I give it like a 6. I feel like people would respond to that like, all right, as a person, it spoke to you. As a critic, you're kind of critical of it. That's fine. But we don't have to be like, oh, worst thing ever,
Right.
Or,
well, there are silly. There are different ways to look at the same films. You're absolutely right. That there should be different scales. Like, this is not Citizen Kane, but it might be the Citizen Kane of military movies.
Exactly. It's not intended to be.
Yeah, it is a full bucket of popcorn because you're going to be, excitedly munching on that as you watch, and you just can't help it.
Right, and nor should you. Nor should you. You should go ahead and just watch that damn movie in all of its awesomeness.
Well, and speaking of 80s awesomeness, you know, who can speak about 80s movies without talking a little bit about Simpson and Bruckheimer?
Oh boy, okay.
Well, I felt like, you know, we've talked about a couple of Simpson and Bruckheimer films so far, and, Flashdance in particular. And we talked a little bit about them in this, but I just looked them up again, and I remembered that Don Simpson had died in the mid-90s, 96 to be exact, of a drug overdose. You know, at first it was like, oh, natural causes. And yes, natural causes, as in his heart gave out from all of the drugs he was doing. I think he had, let me see if I can get this right, 21 different drugs in his system at the time of his death. And he did die on the toilet like Elvis. And apparently he was getting all of these drugs from all over different doctors. There were 2,200 pills found in his home at the time of his death. A $60,000 a month drug habit. I mean, there are a lot of things.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And Hollywood is full of stories like this. I mean, you know, the world is full of stories like this, but when you have the money to fully indulge your habits, this is how far it can go. And in fact, he wasn't around that much for the filming of Top Gun because he was in rehab and he had become so paranoid from all the drugs that he was inside a lot. So he wasn't quite as actively involved with this film. But Simpson and Bruckheimer were so super successful that they were named multiple times by the theater owners as the producers of the year, like 3 or 4 different times. And they have so many hits. You can, you know, just go and look up the list. It's extraordinary. But when you look up Don Simpson on Wikipedia, there is more about his drug habit and other habits than there is about his film career.
No.
Yeah, in fact...
who's the hater? Come on, guys.
Well, he had
the hater?
He had a super reputation for being a party animal.
I mean, okay, but can we, like, talk about, like, the genius part? Like...
He was an amazing producer.
Okay, yeah, he saw genius in specific things that he...
He was amazing at making a certain type of film that really defined the 80s. And love 'em or hate 'em, they did define what films were in the 80s. The Beverly Hills Cop movies, you know, the Flashdance, Top Gun, of course, the Bad Boys, and Crimson Tide, all kinds of things like that. But in particular, there's a handful of them that are the 80s. And I do, though, just have to say this one other thing. That apparently because we just did 9.5 Weeks, he was apparently really big into S&M, but Hollywood Madam Alexandra D. Datig said that her time, and I'm quoting Wikipedia here, so whether or not this is correct in the real world, I don't know.
Not correct in the real world. Did you look at the original source article?
She said that he was the most wicked, depraved, and exciting time. This was the most wicked, depraved, and exciting time of her life. And they end the article with, Simpson was never married after all of that. But yeah, apparently he was pretty wild. But Bruckheimer, still alive, still producing, has produced a ton of TV shows and movies, and still going. So, you know, Bruckheimer seems like maybe he was the more stable of the two.
Wow.
But
thanks for putting that man on blast, I guess.
You know what? It's addiction is a disease, and so the man had a problem. And I'm not talking about the S&M. That's cool. But the drug habit, it's really unfortunate that no one, I don't know, it sounds like a number of people tried to stop him, but that they never were able to save him, unfortunately. So, and as we well know, the Hollywood machine sort of helps to fuel these things and like, hey, you're making money for us? Keep at it. As long as you keep doing what we need, do what you're doing. So I feel like maybe it's another story of maybe Hollywood killed somebody.
Yeah. Well, you know, fame.
Yeah.
There are prices to it.
Yeah, yeah. And especially for that type of high intensity personality is rewarded, but it also has its
okay. Now
cost,
Top Gun production notes. More thanks. I don't need to hear about drug habits.
Well, so you mentioned earlier people who had been considered for the role, I think. Did you?
Nope, didn't mention it on the podcast.
You mentioned that to me separately.
In real life.
But yeah, a lot of people turned it down. Oh, I know what it was. It's because we were talking about people objecting to or having issues with the politics of the film in terms of its glorification of the military. And that's why Matthew Modine turned down the role. And other people who turned it down were Patrick Swayze, Emilio Estevez, Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, Matthew Broderick, Sean Penn, Michael J. Fox, Scott Baio, Tom Hanks. I don't know if all for the same reasons. Travolta asked for too much money. Charlie Sheen was considered too young, and he would later go on to spoof it beautifully in Hot Shots, which, if you haven't watched either lately, watch Top Gun, then watch Hot Shots, and it will make a lot more sense. But Rob Lowe, Kevin Bacon, Eric Stoltz, Robert Downey Jr. were all possibilities, and honestly, I think they're all wrong. I think really Tom Cruise is the only person who could have played this role, played it this well. So I don't think anyone else could have done it and been quite as viable in it.
I agree.
So let's see. Bryan Adams turned down having his song Only the Strong Survive on the soundtrack for the very same reasons that others declined to be a part of the film because of its connection with military. You know, in the scene at the bar, which is a real place, it's the Kansas Barbecue, I think it's called. Kansas something barbecue. The guy that Charlie is meeting up with, she calls him Parry at one point, the older man that Tom Cruise says you'll regret going out with. He is the real-life Viper. His name is Pete Viper Pettigrew.
I like that in the pilot.
And originally, Maverick's first name was going to be Evan, but they changed it to Pete in honor of Pete Pettigrew, the real Viper. So I don't know if he ever offered to be anyone's Rio, but this was the real guy. So apparently Anthony Edwards was the only one not to vomit on the planes. Cruise lost it on the first flight, but he also was totally convinced to do it because he had apparently this great pilot named call sign Bozo, who showed him some really crazy maneuvers, and he's like, yes, I'm on board for it. They were only allowed to shoot 2 missiles for the filming of the movie, which is why in the end sequence, when they're firing the missiles, it looks the same a lot of the time. They've shot it from different angles, but it was really just two missiles. But any others that were filmed were done by a miniature effects company, but apparently they did such a good job that the Department of the Navy conducted an investigation as to whether any additional live firings of missiles had occurred other than the 2 authorized, because they couldn't believe that those weren't real missiles in some of the shots. And, you know, like I said, they were miniatures. The F-14 pilot who flips off the MiG pilot was Scott Altman, and he eventually became an astronaut, flying as a pilot on 2 missions and as a commander on 2 more missions. And the pilot who gets flipped off, the one who's playing an unnamed country's MiG pilot, which we assume is Russia, but or the Soviet Union, and that was Admiral Robert Willard, and he was the lead flight choreographer for the film. But he also was commander of the United States Pacific Fleet from 2007 to 2009, and no one had ever buzzed the tower before. So when they wanted to do that, Bozo, again, Lloyd Abel, was super down with it and really enjoyed getting to do it. I guess they drew straws to see who would do it, and he got to do it. At the beginning of the film, the aircraft carrier sequence that we all think is so gorgeous, apparently it was following the sunset just right, and then the captain turned the ship, and Tony Scott, the director, said, can we turn it back? Because the light's much better the other way. And he said, turning this ship costs $25,000. And supposedly, Scott wrote him a check on the spot, and the check bounced. I don't know if any of that is true, but it's repeated in several places. Rick Rossovich, who is Slider, he got kicked off the aircraft carrier because he didn't like where his bunk was because it was close to the nuclear reactors, and he went and found a different bunk that was apparently in an officer's quarters, and he was told to report to the captain, who I guess he smarted off to the officer whose bunk it was when the guy came back and found him there, and the captain of the ship ordered him to leave for disrespect. But he made out okay because he ended up. No, sorry, it wasn't him. It was Wolfman, Barry Tubb, who, you know what he's from, Joe?
Of course, The Legend of Billie Jean.
Yes, Wolfman. Kelly McGillis.
Sorry, you're putting me to sleep.
Started dating Wolfman. I'm almost done.
I mean, there's so many.
I know.
There's so many.
Let's see. Just the last couple. The center where the counter was in the bathroom that Maverick talks about having sex on and he did the stress test on. When that building was torn down, that bench or that countertop was stolen. And the sex scene, the elevator scene and the sex scene were not originally in the film. And so people wanted to, I guess test audiences wanted to see more of them together. And so the elevator sequence, if you look closely, you can see that Kelly McGillis's hair is a different color, but it's up mostly under a hat. And Tom Cruise's hair is a little bit longer because he was already working on another film. And so they filmed that scene quickly, and then the sex scene was done in just a few minutes, apparently, because they just didn't have much time to do it. So, and finally, I just have to comment on, as we were talking about who the film is made for and accuracy, I guess some of the pilots actually complained to Tony Scott about the unrealistic collection of patches on the suit. And he said, paraphrasing anyway, we're not making this movie for Navy fighter pilots. We're making it for Kansas wheat farmers who don't know the difference. And so it was like, it's not all going to be accurate. We're making it for people who don't necessarily know that, just to enjoy. Because he calls it, what was it that Tony Scott called it? He called it the purest form of escapism and says that it mainlines entertainment. And that sounds bad and maybe good both. So connecting to the new film in Maverick, if you look at the ads, Maverick's leather jacket, the patch on the back has changed. And the original had a battleship, it was the USS Galveston, and it said Far East Cruise, and it had a picture of several flags, and it was Japan, Taiwan, and a couple of other things, but the new one no longer has those flags on it. Particularly, people have noticed that the Taiwanese flag has been removed, and there has been a lot of talk about whether that was to appease China for, when they show the film there to get that market, or if, Chinese investors in the film, I'm not sure about that part, but because, China doesn't recognize Taiwan, it gets really upset when anyone does. So that could very well be the reason why those flags have been changed on the back of his jacket. But look very closely at the trailer, and you'll see that.
Yeah, I think they also lost the jacket. Not lost it, like it went up in flames.
Oh, was it at the Kansas City barbecue place?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it went up in flames.
Right, because it burned up they had memorabilia, and some of it burned in a fire like 10 years ago.
I think that was one of the things listed. I might be wrong, but I think that was. I actually have two things.
Okay.
Because you didn't even talk about any of these, and I don't understand. So the Navy actually has a height requirement for their aviators, and it's 5 feet 8 inches, of which Tom Cruise is 5 feet 7 inches.
Right.
So you had to be a minimum of 5'8", but they let him do it anyway, and he did. He went to Top Gun school in order to go ahead and actually learn how to land the plane on the aircraft carrier and all of those pieces in order to do it. The second one
is Mickey Rourke the right height? Because he was also offered the role.
I don't know. I don't know Mickey Rourke's height off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know how he would have been in the role either.
The second one is that there are several things that happen when they showed the original cut to a test audience. The test audience said, "Hey, we need more fleshing out of the love scenes between McGillis and Cruise." So they actually went ahead and actually put in the love scene, but McGillis was already doing the accused at the time, I think. So her hair was dyed brown, so that's why it tinted that blue tint.
I must have been really boring you because I did mention that.
You were boring me. But then they also did the elevator scene. Did you mention that one?
I did, yeah.
Oh, wow. You really were boring me. I tuned you out. I tuned you the fuck out. Well, I'm so glad that we got to go ahead and talk about those things again. I thought those actually were pretty interesting.
Yeah, that was pretty fun.
And everything. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
Yep, 66.
I don't know what to tell you. When you start droning on about shit for a couple of minutes, I tune you out.
That's cool. I know it happens on the podcast and outside of the podcast.
In real life, hey. Because you get a certain tone, and then you're not looking for me to, like, actually respond. So I just tune out entirely.
Yes. Also, the fact that we're filming this episode with you looking at the back of my head because my tablet was not working properly, so I'm having to look at my computer screen, and so I know that doesn't help.
No, it doesn't help looking at the back of your head the entire time. So yeah, then let's do soundtrack smashes. Hey! So yeah, this soundtrack sold about 7 million copies in the United States. What?
I'm just laughing at no. I'm laughing because it is so many copies. Everyone. I think it's like the joke in Wayne's World where it was just passed out in cereal boxes. Like everybody had a copy.
But here's the thing: like, so Flashdance, they understood the idea of the soundtrack and how powerful a soundtrack could be, right?
Yeah.
Simpson and Bruckheimer. So they wanted to go ahead and do it a second time. So they did, right, with Top Gun. I mean, listen, when you have Kenny Loggins on there twice. And then you have, you're introducing the world to Berlin, basically.
Yeah.
I don't really think you can, like, go wrong with all of those things. So, yeah, and this is the original one that only had 10 cuts. Sold 7 million in the U.S. and 2 million abroad. They actually won Best Original Song, Berlin did, for Take My Breath Away.
Yeah. Even though if they didn't come and sing it at the Oscars because they were going to be part of a medley.
Exactly.
They regretted that decision.
Well, did they?
They said they did.
Well, I don't blame them. I wouldn't really want to be part of a medley. You can go fuck yourself. If you want me to go sing it, I'll sing it. But yeah, my pick for sure. It has to be Danger Zone. I would love to tell you that it's not Danger Zone. I contemplated picking Berlin. Just because I like Berlin, but it has to be Danger Zone. I mean, they play it how many times? 2 or 3 times? 3 times. I think they played it like 3 times. Yeah. And so it had to be Danger Zone. Further on the edge, the hotter the intensity. And if you're picking something else other than Danger Zone, I'm going to pop you on your head. Because you are. Oh, God, that's what that laugh means. What bullshit are you going to pick?
Well, I'm laughing because the back of my head is facing you, so I need to be really careful.
I know, exactly. Target rich environment. Right here.
Yeah, my big noggin.
Exactly. So which one are you picking? Oh, my God.
Look, Danger Zone, I mean, from the guy who brought us Footloose.
Danger Zone?
I was going to pick the other song that always stuck in my head from this. And no, it's not Playing with the Boys. If
Praise
I want,
God.
Which is what I would have chosen if I were going with the whole theory of this is really all about these men wanting each other. Bodies working overtime, feels so good. Which there actually is a great discussion from the Sid character played by Quentin Tarantino in Sleep With Me.
He has passed over into the gay way. They are this gay fighting fucking force, all right? And they're beating the Russians. The gays are beating the Russians, all right?
From, what is it, like 1994 or something? About...
You're killing me with these deep cuts now. You're totally off the fucking road.
The one that always stuck with me is the one that comes up right at the end after the... Lost That Lovin' Feelin', where the two planes spiral around each other, which was Mighty Wings by Cheap Trick. It just always just caught me the right way and stuck with me. So its lyrics are silly as hell. I wanna ride on the silver dove far into the night. But
I can't.
But
this might be a divorceable thing.
What? No, Danger Zone is definitely the best song in it.
I know, but then how do you
agree
not pick that? Are you like pretending to be are you doing the critic shit?
No, I'm just that one. It's my pick because
it has nostalgia for you.
Yes, okay. Because that was the one that I always would go back to, other than Danger Zone. And so
I know, but if Danger Zone is your number one, then you pick Danger Zone. I don't understand how you don't pick Danger Zone.
Well,
if you're by your own admission, you're saying it's the other one I would go back to besides Danger Zone.
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't you pick Danger Zone? Let's have the true conversation.
Well, and you know what? The fact that Danger Zone...
I'm a little bit hangry.
was also written by Giorgio Moroder, which I did not know for some reason. And Lead Me On, Take My Breath Away, and Through the Fire were all Moroder. He didn't do the words. That was Whitlock who did the words for all those. But I did not know that Take My Breath Away and Danger Zone were written by Moroder and Whitlock. So I learned something, and being as I think Giorgio Moroder is amazing.
I love how you're weaseling your way out of this. Why did you not pick Danger Zone as your number one?
Maybe I have a problem with songs that are used 3 times in a movie, so I felt like I had to ding them a little bit for that.
All right. See, that's a fair assessment. Jeez.
Yeah, it's... I think it just, by the third time, I was like, okay. 2 was good. 3 may be excessive.
Sorry, I still think it's amazing. So then they came out with revamped, like extended original soundtrack with 15 songs. You get that CD for about $12. Even the original vinyl goes for like $10. There's only like one red variant of the LP that I think I found that's out there. But yeah, that's pretty much it, I think, for the soundtrack.
And it's like 3 different versions of it out there that have additional material each time. They add more and more of the songs, although the full score has never been released. But...
I only have 2.
Okay.
So
I have
1999, the original 86, and then 99.
There's an 06 as well. It's like a super deluxe
No,
edition.
are you sure the 06 isn't just the... Oh, no, and I have a 2019 when they have a red variant.
Yeah.
That's coming out.
And although the full anthem... the full song soundtrack score has never been released.
I'm okay with that. They'll probably do it with the new release.
Maybe.
Or up and coming.
And I will say the trailer for Maverick has a great slow piano version, even though that's becoming cliche at this point, of that original anthem.
We forgive it. Anything else that you have to discuss regarding Top Gun?
Well, being as this was so impactful to me at the time, we were talking way back at the beginning about owning a VHS copy. And it got me thinking about how this was the first VHS that we ever owned, actually. I think it was the first one we ever rented.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was Top Gun. And what I remember specifically about it was that Pepsi commercial at the beginning that parodies Top Gun, where he has the Pepsi in the plane. It's like got some kind of dispenser, but it gets stuck.
Trouble with your refreshment system?
So he has to do a roll upside down to get the Pepsi into the cup.
No problem.
And I remember being just as fascinated by that commercial as I was by the movie because it had planes in it. And what I had forgotten, I had heard this before, but that this movie was one of the very first to be sold at a reasonable price. Because before that, VHSs were always like $100 or, $80 or $90. And that this one, not only did it have tons and tons and tons of pre-orders, but that it was reasonably priced, and that helped, of course, boost the sales and really push the VHS movement for buying and not just renting VHS tapes. And speaking of the commercial, just one little extra, apparently the military had commissioned their PR group to look at putting a commercial on the release of the VHS tape, and they said, not necessary. They said it's totally redundant because the movie is a commercial, so don't do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It is a huge commercial.
But I think if you go to any Goodwill today and you look through the VHS tapes, you're probably going to find at least one copy of Top Gun in there because there were so many out there.
Still are.
Mm-hmm.
Still are. And just DVD copies, like everything. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say about Top Gun or its place in your little heart?
Well, like I said, it's really a unique film in its time, in that it was the first one to really break a lot of rules of how military films had been made. We had all of the glory films of coming out of World War II, and then they started to shift and change after Korea and Vietnam, and this one not only shifted and changed how we were talking about the military as a culture in the 80s, but like I said, really shifted how a lot of us as young teens were starting to look at patriotism and America and our role in that. And though we've gone through a lot of pendulum swings over the years and a lot of things have come into question, it really was defining for that reason. And it helped that I lived at the time in a military town, or at least a town with a big base. And, there were a lot of people in the service that I knew. And so when I went to military school, to Benedictine Military School in Savannah a few years later, there was that connection still there as planes flew over every day, and feeling like, hey, maybe this was the route I was going to go. And of course, things changed and shifted, and it's not where I went, but it really was culture defining, not just for me, but for a whole generation of young people. And I would dare say that it still operates as a recruiting tool, much as it did in the day.
I can't wait to see what happens after this one comes out. And after the new one, the sequel comes out, because I think everyone's either going to see the sequel and want to see the original, or see the original in anticipation for the sequel if they haven't seen it. And I think that'll be an interesting thing to see what happens with recruitment after that too, and where they really take it.
And how they address what has gone on post 9/11. Because again, they're
not going to get that deep.
Not directly, but they have to sort of address where the world is to some degree, because the landscape has shifted dramatically, not only since the 80s, but, since 9/11. And really,
I don't know that they have to get that deep. I wonder.
Much like in this movie, they may touch on it in ways where they don't really discuss it overtly, but it is still hinted at throughout. I would be surprised if they don't do anything with it. And I have to wonder if Air Boss Johnson is going to come back and want some butts.
You're ridiculous.
If he's still going to be after Maverick.
I'm going to let you know about the homoerotic undertones of this podcast currently. You're talking about butts, tighty whiteys, men playing in volleyball. I did not mention any of those things. That was all you.
Well, I think, maybe Tim Capello should have been on the soundtrack. And maybe he could have done Danger Zone.
Yep. Hi. And so thanks so much for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. The more you rate and review and subscribe, the more people find us. Please check out our website. We're going to have some awesome extras on there too, including that original 1983 article that we were talking about, what the movie is based on. So check out our website at youhaven'tseenwhatmovie.com. Also follow us, social media, Insta, Facebook, Twitter, You Haven't Seen What Movie. And hey, give us any feedback anytime. We read all of it. We will get back to you eventually, but we do read all of it, and we do actually respond to it. So that's the good news in between dissertation chapters. Hopefully I won't be saying that for much longer.
Yeah, but then I've started school, so now I'm going to be wrapped up in the world of reading and writing and failing.
Don't sound so excited about it. That's right.
And succeeding.
If you're not first, you're last.
No points for second best.
No points for second best. That's right. So thanks again for listening, and remember,
be kind.
Rewind.
Bye.
Bye.
So I was reading an interesting article that was talking about how Viper is explaining that Top Gun was established because the kill ratio went from 12-1 in Korea to 4-1 in Vietnam. And he says it's because U.S. pilots became too reliant on missiles and not using their dogfighting skills. Well, someone pointed out that they only use or primarily use missiles at the end, and actually none of the U.S. planes fire the gun. And it could be argued, they were saying, that the U.S. pilots were actually not that great at dogfighting as compared to the other pilots, the foreign pilots they were fighting against. So, I don't know. What did they really learn? Hello? Hello?
I want some butts!